So, I'm going to make this point very clear. If you really believe in yourself, if you really believe in your company, if you really have the boldness to do it, you can do it. So today, for you, at VTEXDay, we have the honor of welcoming the 44th President of the United States of America and one of the most honorable leaders of all time, President Barack Obama, comes to stage.
Portanto,
it is a software engineer interviewing the best and most remarkable politician in the world. I don't know how it goes. I really don't.
well, thank you so much for having me, and it's wonderful to be back in Brazil. One of my favorite places to visit.
This is good to hear.
I love Brazil, although I have to admit traffic in Sao Paulo can be a little tough. Even with a police escort.
Wow. Tell me, what do you like most about Brazil? Just for icebreaking.
Well, this morning, I had a chance to visit with Pelé, so that's one part of Brazil that I love. One of the greatest football players of all time. I love the music. You know, when I was young, I used to listen to, Antonio Carlos Jobim, and wow. You know, when I was dating Michelle, sometimes I would put that on the record player. Put you in the mood. But obviously, what I love about Brazil is its people. And like the United States, Brazil has this amazing diversity. People from different backgrounds, different races, different ethnicities. I think that's a great strength of our two countries. And we're the two largest democracies in the hemisphere. And so the creativity and innovation that comes from people from different backgrounds coming together to work together in freedom, in democracy, that's a message that hopefully will continue for many years to come.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for being here. As Mariano told you when you were entering, I think we were both bringing him, huh? This is boldness. And we have a lot to learn with you about boldness. You have this remarkable career in your life. I understand that you got to the top of the world in terms of politician. And it takes a lot to do this. And I believe that there's a lot of things that you need to have to get there. And when did you find out, when did you learn that you are this overachiever, this person that can overcome obstacles, no matter what they are?
I think the first thing that I always say is that if you are successful, you've been lucky. And I think it's always important to remind yourself of that. Because sometimes I meet people who have achieved great things in life. They're the heads of big companies, they're very wealthy, they've been successful as leaders in politics. But the truth of the matter is that very few people accomplish things by themselves. And so, like most people, I was lucky to have a wonderful mother who told me I could be anything, even if maybe there was no reason for her to believe that. That's what she told me, and I believed it. I had wonderful grandparents who looked after me. But I think that throughout my childhood, because I didn't know my father, I was one of the few people of African descent in the place where I was growing up in Hawaii. I felt sometimes that I had something to prove. And sometimes it's useful, if you can channel it properly, to identify what it is that you're unsure about or some challenge that you've gone through, and use that as an engine, as a motor, for you to work harder. Yes, we can, for example. There we go. But I also think that one of the things that allowed me to be bold was a sense that I failed before and I had survived. I tell young people that it's good to try a lot of things, even if you don't succeed. The scars that you get, the mistakes that you make, those are lessons that will give you confidence later on in life. I think that the biggest challenge for so many of us is fear of failure. When I ran for president of the United States, many people, including people who loved me and were big supporters, did not believe that the United States could elect an African American to become president of the United States. And so often when you haven't seen something done before, there's an instinct on the part of people around you to want to protect you from failure. And that includes even Michelle. I had to say to her, look, if it doesn't work out, it'll be okay. And I think that when I talk to young people now, everywhere I go, I always encourage them not to be afraid to try something just because it hasn't been done before. Because even if they don't succeed, they will learn something from it. It will toughen them up. It'll prepare them for the next stage of their journey.
Perfect. But you know, even when you want to challenge your fears, as you said, and you want to achieve more, and you want to overcome, you gotta have some background. Be ready for the challenge that faces you. So we were discussing here before about education, how important it is to build Brazil as this tech center. Education is key. Could you talk about your education and how impactful it was for your life?
Well, earlier I said that anybody who's successful has had luck in their lives, and they should acknowledge that. But I know that there's a useful saying in the United States. I forget exactly who first said it, but he said, it's funny, the harder I work, the luckier I become. The harder I work, the luckier I become. So we all have luck in life, but how well you take advantage of it, that depends on how hard you work. And obviously, one of the foundations for working hard is to make sure that you have the kind of education that allows you to critically analyze the world around you. I was fortunate that my mother, even though she didn't have a lot of money, she did have a good education, and she was fierce about making sure I received a good education. And she taught me to be curious and to always want to learn more. One of the challenges I think we face in politics and in the world generally is that today so many people, they want to keep out information that contradicts what they already think. People want to fit the facts to the opinions they already have rather than to learn to shape and change their opinions based on new information, new facts. And what I learned from my education was the ability to analyze reality, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it proves that what I thought was true is wrong. Being curious about learning new information and being a lifelong learner, I think, is the most valuable part of the education that I received. And one of the things I worry about sometimes in our education systems, whether it's in Brazil or in the United States or anywhere else, what you want to provide young people is not just the ability to take in information and do their math and do their reading, but also to critically analyze the information they're receiving, to constantly challenge themselves about their assumptions, to continually learn. And it's one of the reasons why I think it's so important in any organization, in any business, in any government, to make sure that you have people who bring different perspectives, different disciplines, different experiences to the table. When I was President of the United States, I knew I made a good decision if I had people around the table who were disagreeing that I could listen to. It's also the reason why it was important for me to always have women at the table. Because if your organization only has men who all look the same and think the same way, then you're probably missing some important information that you would learn from. And the same is true in terms of having people of different backgrounds and different races involved in your organization. It helps you make better decisions because we all have blind spots. And part of, I think, the most valuable education you can get is to meet and talk with people who have different perspectives than you do and can teach you to see the world through somebody else's eyes.
Thank you. You mentioned the influence of your mother for your education, teaching curiosity. We are also just all teachers here, the first lines. Do you have some memories of some teacher that also did something that was impactful for your life?
I had wonderful teachers throughout my life. Some of you may know that even though I was born in Hawaii, I moved to Indonesia when I was 6, and I stayed there for 4 years. My mother remarried an Indonesian man. And when I came back to Hawaii, I was 10 years old. I had this wonderful teacher named Mrs. Hefty in 5th grade. And I was, I think, one of only 2 black children in the school. And I had been living overseas, so I didn't understand all the TV shows, and I didn't dress the right way, and I was very much out of place. And she's somebody who had actually been in the Peace Corps. She'd studied in Kenya, where my father was from. And so she was very excited that I was in her class, and she made me proud of the fact that I was different. And I will always appreciate that. The power of a teacher to instill confidence in a child is one of the great gifts that they can provide. Later on in college, I had a wonderful, all kinds of wonderful teachers, but one of the most important teachers I had was a woman who she was an activist on campus, and she helped to get me politically conscious. At the time, the anti-apartheid movement was very active in the United States. I was one of the young people on campus that was active. We had rallies for the ANC, and we're showing solidarity with the struggles there in South Africa. But I remember after making a very short speech at one of the rallies that I didn't feel was as long as I would have liked. I was kind of complaining about, why my part of the program was so short. And she said to me something that I've always remembered, which is, this is not about you. This is about the cause. This is about the struggle. Your feelings, your ego are not what's important. And that's more important. That was a more important lesson than anything that was taught to me in class. Because I think one of the things that great teachers do is they help you understand yourself and your values and what's important. A bad teacher can still teach you algebra. It may be boring, but they can teach it to you. But what a good teacher can do is to help you identify what are the things that are preventing you from being everything that you can be. And by her telling me and reminding me that if I was serious about the issues that I said I was serious about, that I had to take my ego out of it and give myself and make myself useful, no matter how much attention I got or how much opportunity I had to speak. That was something that I think that I carried with me for the rest of my life. So that's what a great teacher can do. Very good.
This lesson that you just referred reminds me of this alliance that you have with Brothers Keep Alliance. And it says on your website, we help youth get to the full potential. Is this where you learn that you could have the full potential, this small lesson?
But, when I left the presidency, I had to ask myself, what would be the thing that would be most useful for me to do? Because there are a lot of things I care about. But the thing that I realized I can have the most impact on is to train the next generation of leaders. Because each of us are on this earth only a very short time. And the influence and the impact and the power we have comes from inspiring others that are coming behind us to get involved. So the focus of our foundation generally is how do we encourage and empower young people to get involved in their communities, to take power over their own lives, to give them opportunities, to open doors for them so that they can do great things in the world. And I know that here in Brazil, as well as in the United States, and everywhere I go, there is so much talent. There's so many young people who could be doing great things if they just got a chance. The first time I came to Brazil, I remember as president kicking a football with some kids in a favela in Rio. And you look at those kids, they look like me when I was 8, 10 years old. And they may have had the same ideas and energy and possibilities as I did, but The only difference was I had opportunity to get a great education. I lived in a country where I was able to rise despite certain disadvantages. And I always remind myself that if we can give those young people those same opportunities, somewhere in the favela there may be some child who could cure cancer or could invent the next new tech breakthrough if they were just given a chance. So what we want to do is to work with leaders here in Brazil. Before I came here, I was in Colombia. We're working in Africa. We're working in Asia, in Europe. Because if we can create networks that are building up the capacity and the potential of young people around the world, then I'm very confident for our future.
This is really true. We're very empathetic with this. To the cases of our slums and favelas, there's so few opportunities for the young people here. Most of the times, the only option they have is to go to join the crime, or drug dealers, and join mafias. And this is a really tough subject to us if we want to keep up the globalization. Because if we don't do nothing, if we don't use the brains that are there, underutilized.
Well, you're exactly right. Look, I always tell people that helping the disadvantaged, helping children, providing them a good education, providing them social services, health, that's not charity. That is a necessity for economic development for any country. So, if you look around the world, many countries that have the highest standard of living actually have very few resources. If you go to Singapore, they have nothing. It's a little island. It's a little piece of an island. But they have one of the highest standards of living and the fastest growth rates in the world because they have almost 100% literacy, and every person there is making a contribution and can succeed. And I think so often we tend to think of these issues as somehow a charity that we're doing a favor to poor people, but in fact, no. If you are giving everyone opportunity in your country, your economy is stronger, your workforce is more effective, your markets are richer, your companies are going to be more successful. But it requires us to make choices. So we were talking about education earlier and teachers. In Finland, teachers are paid as much as doctors or lawyers, and it is as difficult to become a teacher. The training required and the status they have in society is as high as any other profession, higher, because they understand nothing's more important than how well we teach our children. And as a consequence, Finland has a great education system, one of the best in the world. They always do some of the highest in world rankings. Now, if we're only paying our teachers 1/10 of what investment bankers are making, or 1/100th of what investment bankers are making, then that tells us we don't really value teachers. And that's something that's true in the United States. Part of the reason, by the way, historically teachers are paid low in the United States is because it was one of the few professions that women were working in. And so men took advantage of that and paid them too little, just like nurses. But the fact of the matter is that if we understand how economies work. That in this new knowledge economy, how much muscle you have, what your natural resources are, those things are going to be far less relevant than your knowledge base. And the more you invest in human capital, the faster you're going to grow. The sooner countries understand that, the better off they're going to be. Because particularly with things like artificial intelligence now coming and AI, the likelihood that we're going to be able to employ people in manual labor, in things that can be repeated, machines are going to be doing that far more efficiently, far more effectively. What only people can do is think creatively. What only people can do is to give a child a hug and inspire them and teach them. And so we have to prepare our young people to think creatively, think innovatively, to work as teams. And those countries that do that the best, those are the countries that are going to succeed the fastest.
I'll give you some small introduction to 15,000 people here. We're all challengers of the status quo. We're trying to build technology in a country that doesn't have a tradition of delivering technology company to the world, technology to the world. And I would say that what advice would you give to us to keep moving despite the potential lack of tradition and maybe the credibility that people don't give us for granted? How do we get there?
Well, you know, when you look at how technology moves now in the world, there are certain places like Silicon Valley, obviously, that have an ecosystem that they've built that combines venture capital, great universities like Stanford, existing businesses, and what that creates is a very fertile area for ideas that are always being developed. But I think it's important to remember that one of the powerful things about technology in the digital age is that ideas are not bound to geography. Ideas travel faster than people can move. They travel at the speed of light around the globe. So even though there was a long-standing tradition in Silicon Valley, that's where a lot of the work was done in early computer science, in the internet, you know, iconic companies like Apple and Microsoft and Hewlett-Packard. What's been remarkable is if you go to China right now, Alibaba and Wingwei are moving and competing, and in some ways moving faster in that sector. And you know, I happen to know Jack Ma. He's somebody who was teaching English and was studying briefly in the United States. He saw computers and the idea of maybe helping small businesses sell their goods in China. And suddenly you have a business that's reaching billions of customers every day. Just 30 years later. There was no tradition when he went back and started his company. So I don't think anybody in Brazil or Argentina or Mozambique or Indonesia or wherever you are, if you have access to a modem and servers and a computer, you can be part of this revolution that's taking place. But I do think, as we said earlier, if you want to be successful, then the key is talent. And the one thing that China was able to do is to create a program of education for producing every year hundreds of thousands and then millions of engineers, of people who are proficient in math, proficient in science, so that they've created the soil in which their tech sector can grow. If you have a country that does not have that kind of investment in its people, it's not likely to be successful over the long term. The other thing you also need, obviously, is a governmental structure, a public sector that understands how to create conditions for the market that are successful. So, for example, something as simple as protecting intellectual property. One of the challenges that China has had is that even though it's very good at copying things, it hasn't been as good at creating things. And part of the reason for that is because its legal system did not put in place protections. If you created a wonderful app and somebody just stole it so you didn't make money off of it, well, that was a disincentive to create new applications. So, I always say to people, because sometimes, particularly I think in Latin America, in our politics, you get these very rigid divisions between left and right, and it's very ideological. I say to people who are very conservative and they don't believe in government and they only believe in the market, you can't have a good functioning market if you don't have a good government. If you don't have a good public school system, you won't have a good market. If you don't have rule of law, you won't have a good market. If a business has to pay a bribe in order to get started, if there's corruption, or you have to hire somebody's cousin who doesn't know what they're doing because somebody higher up told you that's the only way you can get along, you're not going to have a good market. So law, transparency, accountability, good governance, a strong tax base, infrastructure, investment in schools, all those things make for a good market. They're good for a business. And if you have, the argument I always make to business leaders, and let me say, even in the United States, they don't always listen to me when I say this. You should be happy to pay your taxes. Pay your taxes because that is the investment you are making in the society that will allow your business to succeed. And if you don't believe that, go to countries where you have weak governments, no taxation, no rule of law. Those are countries where you can do business. Because your business isn't safe, your contracts can't be enforced, you can't find a strong workforce, and the kind of personnel that are going to allow you to grow your business. I think that sometimes we're so obsessed with thinking that money and how much we make and grabbing market share is the only thing that we forget all the conditions that allow a business to succeed. And we make a great mistake when we do that. Thank you.
I guess you're giving good and valuable recipes for reducing inequality in this globalization, right? globalization, there's this pros and cons, and maybe it can increase inequalities in the world as the knowledge and money can flow easier from one country to another. I would ask you, like, this is a subject that is very discussed here in Brazil. Inequalities. We are one of the most unequal countries in the world. And there's no magic recipe. You give like, very hard recipes right now. And I think I would like to listen as we as a society, we as government, we as companies, and we as individuals, how can we reduce inequality?
Look, you know, Brazil, just like the United States, was founded on inequality. And we have to admit it. Even though the United States has a constitution that says, you know, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. At that time, not only were blacks excluded, but women were excluded, and people who didn't own property were excluded. But the genius of our Constitution was that it gave us the means through the democratic process to include more and more people in the family of our country. And the more people we included, the more successful we became. You know, I always say that in sports, for example, I'm a big basketball fan. And the NBA Finals, by the way, I think starts tonight. I don't know how many people here watch basketball. There you go. All right, so you get some basketball fans. But the point I'm going to make is this. The NBA has never been better, partly because you're seeing more and more international players join, because basketball has become more popular around the world. So that now you have somebody like Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's a Nigerian from Greece, but he learned how to play basketball. Now he's one of the best players in the world. In Brazil, there used to be a guy named Oscar Schmidt, who was one of the best basketball players of all time. But at the time, he didn't have the opportunity to play basketball in the NBA. But now you have Nene, you had Barbosa. He's retired, but he's a great player. The point is that the more people, the bigger the pool of talent, the more successful the team is going to be. And the same was true for the United States. The same is going to be true for Brazil. If Afro-Brazilians are not included, you are leaving talent on the field. If women are not included, you're leaving talent on the field. So again, it's in your self-interest if you want to be a successful society to include everybody. Now, that's hard to do because we have all these generations of poverty and disadvantage that have accumulated for such a long time. Sometimes we think to ourselves, we don't know where to start. But the point is not that we're going to get perfect equality. And nobody is arguing that somebody who's lazy should have as much as somebody who works hard. Some people are more talented, naturally. They're going to be able to succeed more. You know, I don't think any of us think that it's a bad thing that Bill Gates was successful because he helped bring about all these computers that we use in our everyday lives. He should be rewarded. The issue is not perfect equality. The issue is, are those of us who are successful willing to give back enough to provide a ladder of opportunity for others that are coming behind us. And the fact that we are not willing to do that is a failure, I think, in our education system, because we don't teach our kids what's important. I mean, one of the things I've learned, it's interesting, being president of the United States, one of the great advantages is you can see every corner of life. You have a great view because you meet everybody, you can talk to everybody, from the richest to the poorest. And I've said this to my daughters, once you achieve a certain level of financial security, once you can buy a house, you can send your children to college, you don't have to worry about do you have enough to eat, you can take a vacation once in a while. Once you hit a certain amount, whatever you have after that does not make you happy. It really doesn't. I mean, I will say I have more money now than I had for most of my life. What makes me happy is when my children are sitting with me and we're laughing. Or when Michelle and I are taking a walk and holding hands. It's not money that is making me happy. But we teach ourselves that our measure of success is the more we have, harder we hold on to it, the better we must be, the higher our status is. And I think that mindset is part of the reason why in Brazil, in the United States, in many parts of the world, we have difficulty creating more equal societies. It's not that we need more stuff. There are people, the wealthiest people in the world, they can't spend all the money they have. I can't spend all the money I have. So it's not that you don't have enough. It's that we've been taught that somehow that's the measure of our worth and our status. And we have to redesign our minds to say that we're at our most powerful and most influential when we're able to help others. If I can suddenly make sure that 10 other children are also getting opportunity, not just mine, what a great, powerful thing that is. But we don't reward that. We don't think in those terms. And I think that it's very important for there to be a revolution. You were mentioning boldness at the beginning. I think there's a revolution of values that has to take place. I believe in markets and I believe in capitalism. I believe in the efficiencies that create and produce wealth. So I don't want to destroy the innovation and the creativity and the freedom that comes about from the market system. But I also think that we have to design those systems in ways that don't distort our values completely, that allow us to say we have a market-based system, it's wonderful, but we want to make sure that everybody is a part of it. We want to have the innovation that allows us to create these amazing technologies, but we want it to be environmentally sustainable. Much good to have really wonderful apps and great virtual reality when the actual reality of the planet is getting hotter and the oceans are rising and the forests are being cut down and we can't breathe. So finding that balance, I think, is something that we should expect from our leaders, and it can't just come from our political leaders. It also has to come from our business leaders. It also has to come from our religious leaders and the leaders in our nonprofit sector. We all have the next generation in ways that we have not done so far.
I'll skip to a question that is, I think everybody here is very curious about meeting and talking to the next former president of the United States. And I would like to ask you some experience about when you were there. Maybe the most difficult day to have. What happened? What was the day after? What was the day after?
Well, I've said this before. The most difficult day that I've had was the day that there was a shooting in a school where 20 small children were shot, as well as some teachers. And my daughters were only a little bit older than these young children that had been shot, and I had to go and comfort the parents. And some of you may be aware, our gun laws in the United States don't make much sense. Anybody can buy any weapon, anytime. Without much, if any, regulation, they can buy it over the internet, they can buy machine guns. And for me, having to speak to parents who had lost a child, just 2 days or a day after it had happened, and not being able to assure them that that would change, that we would fix this. I couldn't bring their children back, but I couldn't even promise them that we would change the law so this didn't happen to somebody else's children. That was a day of great frustration for me. Now, obviously, when I first came into office, the world economy was collapsing. We had 2 wars. I've had challenging days. But that was the day, I think, that emotionally was most difficult for me. The intellectual challenges of being president, I never felt overwhelmed by. Partly because of what I described earlier. And I think these are lessons that apply to any organization. Number one, I learned by the time I was and so I had great confidence in the people that I had working with me. And I was a strong believer that you should never be afraid to have people who are smarter than you in the room. Sometimes people think that being a leader means that I always have to have the answers. And my view was, what made me a good leader was I always had the right questions. But I counted on smart people to have the right answers. Because the truth is, as President of the United States, you couldn't be an expert in everything. I had to deal with nuclear issues, I had to deal with climate change, I had to deal with the economy and finance and Ebola, and you couldn't be an expert in all those things. But what I could do is I knew how to ask the right questions, how to build a team, and to create a process, as I mentioned earlier, in which everybody had a perspective. And we were able to test out our ideas and our theories based on rational thought and facts and data and reason. Very few of the big problems that came to my desk were ones that were easy to solve. Because by definition, if it was easy to solve, somebody else would have solved it. The only things that came to me were the things that nobody else could solve. So I only had hard problems that didn't have perfect solutions, and so I learned to be comfortable making decisions based on probabilities. If I had done a good analysis and I had good data and I heard all the points of view and all the arguments for and against a certain course of action, at the end of the day, I might have a 55% chance of this being right, 45% chance of it being wrong. When I ordered the team to go in to get bin Laden in Pakistan, we didn't know for sure that was bin Laden, but I trusted the process that we had set up that allowed me then to take that action. When we were saving the banks and the financial system, some of the things we tried, we didn't know they would work, but I created a process that I knew I could trust. So I say all that because sometimes people would ask me, how did you handle the tensions of having such big decisions and this burden on me? And what I said to them is I couldn't always guarantee that I was making the right decision, but I could guarantee that I had looked at all my options and that this was, based on the information I had, the best decision I could take. I could have confidence about that. And I think for those of you who are in whatever leadership capacity, if you know that you have done things the right way and thought through all the possible variations on how you might solve the problem, then you have to let go of fear and just say, okay, this is the decision I'm making, and hopefully it works out. And you won't get the right decision every time, but over time, on average, you'll make better decisions than somebody else will.
Ele é um monstro.
Talk about challenges. Let's talk about accomplishments. What is like most proud? What you are most proud about your administration?
Well, a couple of we kind of saved the world economy, so I'm pretty proud of that. People don't remember how bad things were. Not just in the United States, but globally. Trade was shrinking, unemployment was rising, capital markets were frozen, and it took a long time to heal from the wounds that had been given to the economy, but we stopped the bleeding reasonably quickly. And that affected billions of people. So I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that we provided health care to 20 million Americans in the United States that didn't have it before. Despite great resistance from some of my political opposition. And when you meet a young man who says, I had a tumor and I didn't know I had it, but because of your law, I went and got a checkup and they caught the tumor early and it was removed and now I'm healthy and I've got a job and here's my child and can we take a picture? That makes you feel pretty good. And I think, obviously there are other things that I'm very proud of. Even though right now my country is the only country that's not participating, the Paris Accords on climate change are a very significant thing that I think it's fair to say would not have happened without the work that I did and that we did. We had an amazing team that, at least without solving the problem of climate change, created the architecture, the framework around which we can begin to try to solve the problem. But maybe the thing that I think maybe the two things that I'm most proud of are the fact that Michelle and I were able to raise two wonderful girls in a really strange place. Malia and Sasha are now grown women, and they're smart, and they're funny, and they're kind, and they're respectful. And we were worried that maybe, you know, if you're raising somebody and their father's the president and their mother's the first lady, that they might get a little bit crazy. But they came out beautifully normal and just good people. And I'm also very proud of the fact that, you know, in 8 years, I didn't have a scandal. You know, nobody went to jail. Nobody got in trouble. You know, we made mistakes. My administration wasn't perfect, but we maintained our integrity. And I think we were able to show and set an example that it is possible to achieve you know, great power without being corrupted. And I think my hope is that as young people consider a life of public service and going into politics, that they're able to say, okay, well, there's an example of somebody who was able to do something good, but didn't become consumed by the power that they had. And I know that it was important for me when I was young, when I was in law school, when I was in college, that I could look up to certain figures like Nelson Mandela or Václav Havel or others who had shown themselves to have achieved high office and significant political power, but were able to maintain their core and their values, and to remind themselves that what's important is not about you; it's about the people that you serve. And when I say to young people, they say, "I want to be a leader." How do I become important or have influence? I always tell them that the measure of a good leader is, are you able to empower other people? Have you served other people? Have you made them feel as if they can achieve their dreams? And if you're only thinking about yourself and how you are holding on to your own power, then you may be a leader in the formal sense. You may have an office. Just as if, you know, in business, you can cut corners and cheat and behave unethically, and sometimes you might have a lot of money short term. But that's not the kind of leadership that lasts. Just as those aren't the businesses that last, those aren't the political careers that last. The ones that last are the ones that are built on a firm foundation.
I'm sure you remember history. I'm sure my daughter here will study when she's older. I'm so glad to have you here. I hope you enjoyed this chat, you all. I hope you teach us a little bit more how to be bold, how to be inclusive, just in the society that we have, exclude so many people. I hope that we learn with you, that we learn and we'll go home and sleep and be better tomorrow. So I think our time is going out. I will ask you to do your final words.
Well, I want to say to the people of Brazil and everybody who's here, it's wonderful to see you. I look forward to coming.